Welcome to Third Tuesday Conversation, the ELCA Youth Ministry Network's monthly podcast. Our goal is to engage in conversations affirming that youth ministry looks a million different ways in a million different places and with a million different experiences. Good day to you all. My name is Veronica Brittle, and I'm coming to you live from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And who else is here with me today?
This is Alex LaChapelle coming to you from sunny Marquette, Michigan in the Upper Peninsula. That's a big change for me.
And this is Jessica Newton. I am back from all my work travels and cheer travels, joining you from Houston, Texas. And I am very excited because my dear friend, Kristen Krueger, PhD, is with us today. Kristen is many a things with many a hats, many a gifts. She is a historian who specializes in social change. She is a manager of curriculum team for the ELCA Youth Gathering. I think a lot of you know about that. And Kristen cares deeply about collecting and sharing stories, especially um, the stories about the ways the world can change for the better. She lives outside of Houston. She is my neighbor in the next subdivision over, and lives with her daughters, husband, and 2 dogs. So, Kristen, welcome to the 3TC podcast.
Woo, 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 welcome.
Happy to be with y'all.
Yay.
All right. Well, we're very glad to have you with us tonight. And our topic, I think, will be an interesting one. So with my work with leaders in congregations and judicatories across the country, something that I've been hearing for the last year and a half, mostly from pastors and deacons, but I feel like this is across our churches and into our youth ministries as well, is really the deep struggle to be a Christian leader right now, especially kind of divisive politics in our country, and that climate has filtered into our churches. Um, so, our topic today is really going to be about the intersections of faith and civic life. And so, Kristen, we're just going to jump right in. Tell us how you're engaged with young people right now in your life.
So I have a teenage daughter. So I have teenage people at my house on the regular. It seems that we're one of the homes where the teenagers like to collect themselves, which is delightful. Also, I teach our middle school, high school, Sunday school group at my local church in Katy. I run 2 Girl Scout troops for upper elementary school students and high school students, so a nice big range of young people in those
Mhm.
communities, and I right now, those are the closest thing to a youth group that my children have. They're not faith-based organizations, but they are absolutely the place where they experience and explore the kinds of things that, many of us experience in youth groups.
Mm. Mm.
Then I also, get to write the curriculum for the 2027 youth gathering with a great team of people, so that's my other kind of place of touching the lives of young people and the people who work with them.
I love that. I love that. So really engaging with students in a lot of different communities, which I love, right? And it gives you such a cross section, especially where we live. There's a lot of oil and gas folks. So there's just a broad range of people, right, from all over the world with different faiths and different backgrounds and different cultures. It's a really unique place to be. Um, so let me ask you, Kristen, as a person of faith, you grew up going to church, you grew up in a home where faith practices and living out your faith was important. Um, why is it important to you to engage in civic life? And how does your faith guide you or influence you in that?
For me, the 2 things can't be separated. I
Mm,
don't know how to be a person of faith that doesn't engage in the world around me. I think that's not the example that Jesus gave us is of being active in the communities around us, particularly the communities that might make people feel a little bit uncomfortable, and that's the work that we are called to do. I also know through all of the work I've done as a historian that our communities and our connections are what make the world better. So the more
Mm,
invested we are in our communities, the more we know the people who live around us who might not be the same as us, whose beliefs look different than ours, whose experiences are different than ours. If we can invest in knowing one another and supporting one another, everybody's lives get better. And I think that's what being a faithful person is about being able to build lasting
mm,
communities where we care for the people that are around us.
yeah, I love that. I love that. Alex or Veronica, Alex wants to weigh in, it looks like.
I think that's like it's the best statement, and then we run into somebody else walks into the church with that same idea, and we completely disagree. And I
Mhm.
think that's like the part that I struggle with, especially when I see it with our youth. Like I have these memories. Uh, I was transitioning out of a church between I think 15 and 16 to go overseas and stuff. And I had so many students that were most likely bringing, I think, some of their parents' ideas and thoughts, but they'd bring them into confirmation. And once in a great while, we just have to like go full stop. Like, okay, we get it. There's an election. It's 2016's coming. Like, we're going to put a pin in all of this. I understand your family is going this direction. I understand your family's going this direction. Right now, we're going to discuss something completely different. And so we're going to take, but it would like, all it would take was like the right comment. And then it'd be like off to the races. And then I think what happens sometimes is you get like a student that is sitting off to the side that goes, hey, pastor, leader, what do you think about all this? And it's like, well, I have thoughts. I have thoughts for days. Also, I'm trying to keep us centered and in a conversation of love and care when I know that, like, for me, some of this stuff is cut and dry, exactly like you said, or I'm all in. Where have you seen, and maybe this has happened even in the troop, right? Like the ability to say differences of opinion, uh, can be dangerous, but also need to be heard and respected. Like, where do you find your middle ground on a conversation
mm,
like that?
mhm, mm,
Yep, that's such a real question. Like, that's absolutely right. Every single time we have these conversations in a larger group of people, this is where we end up. I mean, yes, that's exactly how it looks. I think for me, I always start with, and we've done this a lot within our high school, middle school group, the groups, the kids, students who come represent families across all kinds of different belief systems and spectrums. And the thing they've asked us to spend our time talking about, I asked them how they wanted to spend their time, and they have wanted to spend their time this semester looking at current events and how those impact our faith lives. You can't
mm.
do that without having some really hard conversations, right?
Yeah,
Especially maybe this year since January, I feel like we've had a great once a week example of what it looks like to be a person of faith living in the world or not. And we've discussed those in all those different ways. We started with what are the things that we can agree on and who are we called to be? So
mm, mm,
we looked at
mm,
what are the commandments that we are given by Jesus, and it comes down to love God, love people. Right, is where they were able to distill that is that, if you were to take Jesus teaching this, what are the 2 greatest commandments, and you were to make it as simple as possible, it would be love God and love people. And so if that's true, then anything that doesn't support those 2 things isn't walking the walk that we are called to do. So if an action doesn't create a situation where people are being loved, even people we disagree with, even people who, you know, we think are not acting in the same way of love that we want them to, right? That they need to have a space where they feel safe to have an opinion. And if that opinion is an opinion that hurts others, it's not an opinion that's welcome in our space.
yeah,
The conversation that we've left because some opinions are hurtful to whole communities of people. And while, anyone can hold that opinion, that's not an opinion that is welcome in the spaces that I am creating with the students in our room because we want people to feel loved and heard and seen and welcome. We don't want to build a community where it's okay to say racist or homophobic or misogynistic things to one another, right? Those are unacceptable things if you're going to hold the value of love God, love people.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree. It's important to, set the expectations and the rules of engagement when bringing young people in together. I think they understand that covenant you make with each other, and you have to remind them so much that they remind each other. They say, "Hey, we don't talk to each other like that in here."
Mhm.
You could talk like that outside and things, but in here is a space that we created just for us, to speak in truth. You mentioned commandments and love God and love others. What are some other scriptures or something that center you or bring you back to you, as you engage in civic life, either in the classroom with the kids or with your own children or out in public when you're being a public witness? What sort of scriptures do you turn to that give you that strength and help you engage?
Yeah, this has been an ever-changing thing, I think, as it is with scripture, right? We
Huh.
find other pieces of scripture at different
Of
places.
course.
But right now, for me, the scripture that I've been spending a lot of time with, I think in part because it's one of the scriptures for the youth gathering, so I've been digging into it for that reason as well. But is the story of the Good Samaritan, in particular, the question at the beginning of who is my neighbor? And
Mm.
that the answer is, right, your neighbor is all of the people who you might not want to be your neighbor.
Yeah.
Uh, and the deeper I've learned and dug into that, the idea that this ongoing cultural divide between the Jews and the Samaritans is actually based on people who are cousins who have more things similar than different in the way they view the world. Their theologies are based on the same stories. They consider
Mhm.
themselves worshipers of the same God. And their divide is over essentially which temple is the right temple to worship in.
Yeah.
Right, and that's the very simplified version of this very long history of people, of course, but if we can think about, to me, that just echoes so much that, this idea of, if we were to look at politics in our country today as an example in civic life, at the end of the day, people have more in common than not.
Mm.
And we divide over things that from the outside might even feel just that trivial, but when you're experiencing it isn't. And sometimes it really truly isn't, right? Because these are identity based things. For the Samaritans and the Jews, right? Where the temple is, this is an identity based theological thing. Um, and yet they share more than they don't. And the question becomes, right, who is my neighbor? It's all these people who share more with you in common than they don't because they are a shared humanity. And I wonder what it looks like if we can somehow see all people as God's people, full stop, instead of, needing to um, create some of these divides. And at the same time, right, I don't think Jesus gives us a pass, right? It's not just love everybody all the time. That's a little bit too simple, right? I think also says, but you have to stand up for the people, right? Stand for my people when others are hurting them.
Mhm.
And that's also mixed into that story, right? It's not okay to say, we love the tax collectors and we love the Pharisees and we love all the people who walked past. We do. And the right choice was to stop and help and stand up for the person who needed that in
Mhm.
that moment, right? That's the part that we're going to celebrate.
Mm.
Well, it's interesting too, because if we ask kids, right, like especially the little kids, they're all in on
Mhm.
these conversations. Like these Bible stories land so perfectly and so easy. And then our kids grow up and then they attach to parents and teachers and coaches and friends. And all of a sudden we find that we're really, really good at alienation. We're really good at finding all the dividers. We see our talents start to differ. We see our looks start to differ. And all of a sudden everything about us becomes something that you can label good or bad. And I think that's the piece that I wonder, how can we maybe even start these conversations in the house by like encouraging, and I don't have kids, so I feel like I'm always the one that's like, let me just give a pitch to parents. And then it's like, Alex, you don't know anything. But I wonder if you have any thoughts on where does this conversation start before it ever comes into the church, in the way of parents, you should talk to your kids about both like faith and civic duty, and help them make sense of it, that what we do on Sunday plays into what we do in the world.
Yeah, so we've been really intentional about that in a lot of different ways as my children have been growing up. I have a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old, and they are as different as night and day in every possible way. If you guys could see Jessica, you know she's laughing because she knows them well, and they are as different as two humans can be. But
Yep.
on this one, we have always made a point their whole lives that, over dinner, they hear us talk about current events and they hear us ask each other. My husband and I talk about things going on in the world, and they're encouraged to ask questions so that they can understand it too. Always in age appropriate ways and all of those things. But the truth is, there's understand plenty of things if we can discuss it with them and make a
Mm,
space where they're allowed to ask questions and be curious. And we've also made a point of making sure that they see a bigger world than the world that is just our family or just our, rather privileged community, that they are aware of where they fit in the rest of the world. And it comes out in watching them in really different ways. My oldest has this innate sense of social justice that, meant that she was the one signing us to go to all the protests after the 2016 election, even though she was in 3rd grade and 4th grade, right? She was the one making the posters and making sure we were doing all the things and, um, surprised everyone by knowing all the chants. And, she's the kid who left her high school band concert so that she could join the on-campus protest when they were performing at a college. And my kid ditched the band to go to the on-campus protest so that she could protest the occupation of Palestine, right? She's that kid, and this is who she is. And that's amazing, and some of that, I think, is just who she is, and some of that is she's learned through our conversations that it's okay to speak out and to say things that are not right when you believe things are not right, and that when she has those opinions, we're gonna support her and walk alongside her as she does it. Her sister, who's 10, is a very different human and would never voluntarily want to go to a protest, but 4th grade girls are some of the meanest people on the planet because, I don't know how much time you've spent
fair.
with 4th grade girls, but they are learning really the first, like, big jump into this idea of you're in and you're out. Seems to happen at about 10.
Mm, mm.
And they create lots of interesting barriers of, we can be friends with her, but not that one, and this girl can be our friend this week, and next week she can't, and all of these rules that are absolutely arbitrary and change day to day, um, were really hard for my kid to navigate until she finally came home and she, was like, "You know what? I've had enough." It's like, "Okay, tell me what happened." She's like, "I sat down all my friends," and this is like 10 little girls. She sat all and she was like, I sat them all down and I said, "Look, I'm done with all your drama. You can be friends with you and you don't have to be friends with you, but if you're gonna be friends with me, then you can't tell me anything mean about anyone else anymore." And I just thought, "Okay, somewhere in these conversations, you're getting it." Right? Like, she's
Mm,
the one I was never sure, are you hearing the things that we're saying? But she was getting it. We don't have to listen to people or welcome things that are not in our worldview, right? Like, she was very clear, "My friends can think what they want, they can have the drama they want, but I don't have to be a part of it. I can be your friend, and I cannot say and I can tell you, right, this is not okay.
mhm.
Not
That's
okay for you."
fantastic. She needs a TED Talk.
I mean, if
This is
anybody
how
needs a
you
TED
sit
Talk, it's
them
this.
down.
Oh, bless it. That would be amazing.
Line
I'm
up,
in.
all of you.
I'm
Line
in.
up.
Come on, Josie.
Yeah, she's in. But, but I loved it because it's so very honest, but also, right, that's her values. Like, you can have all your own feelings, but I'm not gonna be involved. Keep me out of it. And she could name it. And I think sometimes it's just that, right? Helping your kids see that it's okay for them to name, "This is what I believe and this is what I value," and be able to stand by that.
Hmm. I'm loving all of this. I'm curious. I want to circle back to your Sunday school class. I'm really curious about what are the topics that have interested them the most recently? Like what are they wanting to know about? What are they wanting to talk about?
Yeah. So they've been especially concerned about and following all of the discussion and yeah, constantly changing current events around immigration and the way that that impacts people. Um,
Yeah.
we spent time learning about what our Lutherans in Minneapolis were doing, and they read those stories so that they could see, right, very clear examples of this is what people from our very own faith community, how they
Yeah.
were engaged in that, right? That was really meaningful for them to see and understand, but it's also very real for them because, our kids go to school with people who are primarily immigrant communities.
Yep.
Um, and I think it's a piece that often gets missed in talking to the kids in my community in that they're affluent, right? They don't look like migrant workers, but that doesn't mean the kids in their schools aren't all immigrants.
Mm.
Most of my daughter's friends' parents are not citizens of this country, even if
Yep.
their children are. Um, and so they are deeply aware of the fact that their friends' parents
Mhm.
are, you know, at risk of ICE coming to their doors, that their friends aren't allowed to travel because they don't think airports are safe for their families, right? That when
Mhm.
there's a school trip, those friends stay home because of those things. And so we've had talked a lot about what does it look like to welcome our neighbors, to welcome immigrants, to welcome refugees. That's been really at the core of some of their questions is
Mm.
disconnect between we believe that God welcomes all people and we're watching that not be a thing that's happening.
Yeah.
And then I will say the other thing that they are really concerned about is the fact that they don't hear all the leaders in their faith communities. And this is not just my youth group, but the other kids that show up at my house on the regular, that they don't hear the leaders in their faith communities talking about these things, right? They've
Mm.
seen it on the news. They know that other faith leaders are engaged in this, but the faith leaders that they have relationships with are choosing safer, more veiled ways of talking about hard things. And
Yeah.
they are desperate to hear the leaders in their lives may take these things seriously and name things that are inappropriate, things that are unsafe, things that are sinful as those things. To say, this is not okay, this is against our faith, this is not what we believe in. They very much want to hear that from the adults in their lives and are missing it when they don't see that from their leaders.
I might be one of those leaders. I think that's one of the hardest things. And I think, I hope those kids are saying that to their pastor, their
Mhm.
leaders, because I think that's one of the things that I struggle with is we don't have a lot of kids at my church. And so I want to think and process. But when I process with people, and, I have a pretty good thumb on the congregation after 4 years, we're a really purple space. Some people are looking out the window going like, God bless America, with really no issue with some of the things that you're speaking about. And others are frantically frustrated and feeling everything. And I think this is where I actually want to give a lot of kudos to those kids for saying the thing. And now I think it is on maybe those younger people to say it in a space where the adults have to respond. Because if I do it, it's just like, oh, I always knew he was the liberal guy, you know. And I think sometimes those young people do have a voice that can push us into those spaces. Because it's
Mhm.
I think about that every week, reading a text and being like, is this too perfect for the situation we're in? We're in Acts right now reading stuff, and it's like, they shared everything, and then Stephen's getting stoned, and you're like, like here they're talking about the perfect utopian, world where nobody eats till everybody has enough. And then it's like Stephen is like looking to heaven saying like, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. And you're just like, we're seeing it, right? Like we're breaking down these walls in Acts, thinking of the early church, and then we're like, but also, let's just everybody go back to their homes now, like, and just be nice. I think the scariest thing in the world is that someone heard me say, "I think I heard you today." Just say, we just have to be nice to one another. And I'm like, crap, I did a bad job. Like, because
Mhm.
that's so starter to the conversation. And all these kids, all these youth have already like figured that out. Being nice is the first thing. Like standing up for like those who aren't having others be nice to them is the next thing. That's the Jesus thing. That, you're talking about Bible stories. I think about that woman, that Jesus goes like, if you got sin, you throw the first stone. And everyone's just like, I don't want to throw that stone though. And I want that to be, and I see that even in your daughter's story, right? It's like, I'm going to sit all of you down. Like, if you're all going to throw a stone, we're all going to have headaches by the end of this. So like, just don't throw them around me. I'm going to keep it clear, and it's like, how do we get students that say like, hey, pastor, what about, and lean over to the adult and say, what about this? What's your thoughts on this? And like make an adult tell a child like the truth, right? Like, do you really think this is a good world? Everything about it? Everything? You're fine with everything that's going on right now. Say it to the 10-year-old. It's a great world. What about this? What about this? The 10-year-old starts firing, and then I think you hear back, oh, well, I mean, and it's like, did the stereo break? What's going on here? We've got to start. So this is a good challenge for me to remind myself, if a 10-year-old's asking me why I'm not talking about it, maybe I need to think about that for a long time.
Well, and I think I'm with you. Their students have this voice that they can ask those hard questions. I also know that they won't if they don't feel like they're going to be heard, right? So our young people who are used to being, responded to in ways that our kids can smell bullshit a million miles away. Our teenagers know if you're giving them platitudes. And so I think, yes, we can absolutely ask them to be that voice. And I think as the adults in the room, we need to be brave enough to use our voices so that they feel like it's okay for them to use theirs. It's hard. And I know that it's risky. And I know that, you know, those of us who work in the church, that these are our jobs on the line. And if we want our young people are looking for a faith that matters, a faith that connects to the world, and this is where, like, the way that they will find it
Yeah.
is they can find leaders who are willing to be honest and
Yep.
open up to these things.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, Alex, it's a real, I mean, it's a real challenge, right? Like your concern is valid about, right, how am I true to the message of the gospel that is very radical, um and extravagant, right? In the love that Jesus shows others, right? And the way he stands up for people.
And then I
And
think
at the same time, right, to know your community, right?
yeah,
And know how, how much can you push people, so that they continue to listen and wonder. And when we did a panel like a month ago with some of the bishops from the ELCA and topic, and it was so good to hear them talk about, right? Like, this is scripture that grounds me. I know I have this call, and I have to also pay attention to who my audience is in my community, and how do I help challenge them in a way that, right, is through the lens of our faith. And I mean, for me, and I don't preach every Sunday, right? I'm not accountable to a congregation, so I probably have more leeway to. Um, and I've also had to preach on some Sundays in this last year that were really hard Sundays to preach on. And the way I got at them for me was to ask questions, right? Like I preached the Sunday after Charlie Kirk was assassinated and there was like two school shootings. And I looked at them and I said, okay, we can look at numbers, right? Let's look at the numbers of how much gun violence has increased in the last 15 years. I mean, it's in schools, right? Like it's insane. And I didn't say anything about, oh, gun laws or anything like that. But my question for them was, what I want you to consider is, what kinds of communities are we building? What kinds of communities are we building in our schools and in our churches where young men, and they're always, I mean, all the shooters have been boys, right? Teenagers. Um, they feel like that's the only way, right? Like that's the solution to their problem, right? Like how are we creating cultures of seeing people, of loving them, of supporting them, right? All of those kinds of things. Um, right. So getting at it from a different angle of vision, but yet still addressing it. I don't know. Were you going to add something, Kristen?
No, I'm just thinking that's exactly the way that I think leaders can open the door for these conversations. I think young people aren't looking for adults to give them the answers. They're looking for the space to have a conversation,
Yeah.
that in a space in which they're going to be really heard, right? To be heard and validated in having opinions, not necessarily that we have to agree or support everything they're saying, but the young people I work with, when we've asked them, right, what's the one thing you wish adults knew? The thing they keep telling me over and over again is, I wish the adults in our church thought that just because I'm young doesn't mean I'm not worth listening to, right? They all feel
Mm,
like they are dismissed, because of their age, that they're not taken seriously, and all they really want is to be heard, to have space for them to ask hard questions. What does God say about gun violence? What is God saying about the fact that there are all these, different versions of Christianity floating around my school that look different than the version of Christianity that I'm hearing,
yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm hearing, like, they are surrounded by a lot of different types of ideas around Christianity that don't match our theology. They would love to have space to talk about that, right? Without, condemning their friends who follow those other ideologies, but to be able to say, this is what I believe and this is how it fits, so that they are equipped to have those
Yeah.
conversations.
And they have a language, right? That's always
Exactly.
uh-huh.
Yeah. And I think that really just starts with listening and asking questions, giving them space to do that.
Mm,
Wow, what a great conversation. Thank you so much. I
Yeah,
really learned something and I feel good now. I feel challenged. And I hope everybody listening also takes up that challenge to push back against their own fears and things like that and just listen to the youth and find out what they're thinking and enable them to speak to each other in truth and love as well. So thank you so much, Kristen. That was wonderful.
yeah. Thank you, Kristen, so much.
Yeah.
Before we go, here are a few quick announcements and reminders. Obviously, the extravaganza was a while ago. We had a fantastic time. Just a reminder, those recordings, they're available. You can grab them. Maybe you need to refresh something that you heard. Maybe you missed a session and you want to go back on it. Just remember that those are great videos, not only to use for yourself, but you can use with your congregational leadership or volunteers. Also, Martin's List has been refreshed. We've gone in and cleaned up the look, and we've done some work under the hood to make it faster and more efficient. Be sure to look there first for resources shared by your friends and colleagues. It's a great resource available to all our Plus level members for free. Thanks to all those who are members of the network. Your membership makes possible Third Tuesday Conversation, Oasis, Connect Journal, Formation Co-op, Martin's List, Extravaganza, and much more. If you're not a Plus level network member, we encourage you to join. Our memberships are what make all of this possible. We're grateful to be a community that cares for this ministry. Thanks so much for listening. New podcasts will be released on the third Tuesday of every month. Be sure to like and subscribe so you receive them as they come out, and share them with your friends. And finally, thanks to the one, the only, Paul Amlin, the 3TC producer, for his work. Have a great week, and look for our next episode being released on, you guessed it, the third Tuesday next month. This is Alex signing off.
Veronica signing off.
And it's Jessica. We'll talk to you guys next month.